Andre Pallante, he's him. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you, morning hours of Friday, July 5th, 2024. We're breaking down yesterday's Cardinals win Thursday afternoon on the 4th of July in Pittsburgh. Cardinals 3, Pirates 2, another close game, another extra inning game. And this time the Cardinals come out on the right side of it. We've got plenty of performances to break down from the game. So if you want daily Cardinals coverage throughout the season and the offseason, we're all year round here on B-Schaeff Daily. Hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel or go follow B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify. Spotify actually has a way that you can listen to the podcast ad-free if you become a subscriber over there and you'd like to get rid of ads. YouTube has the channel membership with perks. The link to that is in the description of this video. Let's talk Andre Pallante, though. I think we should start there from Thursday's game, as Andre Pallante has done a really, really nice job for the Cardinals as their number 5 starter. He's not going to be perfect every game, but as we've even seen from the rest of the Cardinals rotation this year, nobody's been perfect every game, right? The guys that are going to the All-Star game or they're talking about Cy Young consideration. And the Cardinals really, other than Sonny Gray, don't have anybody like that. And even Sonny has had some moments where it's been pretty dicey for him. So to see Palante doing what he's done as basically the last line of defense within this rotation, to turn the rotation back over, you need somebody that can just be solid for you. And I'm not going to throw anything out when I give you these stats. I'm going to count every start, including the bad one that he had in Houston, including the one against San Francisco Giants at Rickwood Field, where the bullpen was not able to get rid of some of those inherited runners that Palante left on the bases, and those guys come around to score, so he gave up 5 earned runs in that game. I'm going to give you the full stats of Andre Pallante, and you tell me if this is not very conducive to a quality number 5 starter. Remember, we're talking about the 5th starter. He has started since joining the rotation, 7 games for the Cardinals. He has pitched 35.0 innings. It's exactly 5 innings per outing after the 7-inning performance that he had on Thursday. ERA of 3.34. And it's not that he's doing it all with smoke and mirrors. His FIP, if you are a FIPster, you like fielding independent pitching to understand a little bit deeper. Well, how much is he reliant on the defense behind him being great? 3.93 is the FIP. So it's a sub-4 FIP from the Cardinals' number 5 starter. He's allowed an opposing OPS of 685. So he's keeping the ball in the ballpark, only 3 home runs in those 7 starts, and has done a really nice job of just getting the Cardinals through. But what they needed from him yesterday was more than just your standard number 5 starter. And I don't know that I was totally aware of this coming into the game, but the radio broadcast alluded to it throughout the game. And then if you listen to Ollie Marmol's postgame, this evidently it was the case that the Cardinals were once again down some relievers. Ryan Fernandez and Ryan Helsley, I assume, were just not available. If you listen to Ollie's postgame, he didn't specifically say it, but he was asked, I think it was Lynn Worthy of the Post-Dispatch that asked him, hey, if such and such couldn't get through that spot in the bullpen, who would have come in? What would you have done? And Fernandez and Helsley were not mentioned among the options. So I tweeted this out yesterday, and it's been a huge topic of conversation this season as far as what's going on with relievers, who's available on a daily basis, who should they be pitching less often so they don't get burned out? Should guys be pitching more often in back-to-back scenarios? Should they make themselves available? It seems like a lot of times on Narrative Street, we like to play it both ways and argue that Ollie Marmol is burning out his bullpen because these guys are pitching too often. But then there are times where we look at them not being available and we complain about that because we want to see the best relievers be available in these tight situations. The problem is the Cardinals are playing tight situations almost every day. They are in these close games constantly in 2024. And that's honestly more so to me than anything Ollie Marmol is doing, more so than, he pulls his starters too early, more so than any of that. I think it comes from these close games the Cardinals have played all season long. Because when you are constantly in 1-run and 2-run games, it stands to reason that you're going to have more of those situations where you want your premier relievers to be out there. In 1-run games this year, the Cardinals are 16-12. This a stat I'm getting from MLB.com. I'm wondering where I could look up how many 2-run games they've had and their record in those, because 16-12, that's 28 1-run games. The Brewers have played more than that. They played 29 of them. The Pirates have played 29. The Cubs have played 33. You look in other divisions, the Cardinals have played more one-run games than everybody in the NL East. They played more than everybody in the NL West. So it's kind of been that NL Central division that's played a lot of close ones, and some of those have obviously come against one another. The Cardinals had one yesterday, but so did the Pirates, so they get credit for that too. But the Cardinals' record in those one-run games, 16-12, so 28 of them of the 80-some-odd games, 86 games the Cardinals have played have been one run. That's doing some quick math. That's about 1/3 of their games have been one-run games, and it really feels like there have been a number of games in which it was 2 runs in either direction, too. So a lot of close games by the Cardinals. That's why the bullpen gets burnt out more so than usual. But it just seemed to be that yesterday Ryan Helsley and Ryan Fernandez were once again not available based on the tenor of the conversation, and it was kind of hinted at by the radio broadcast during the game. And when they're hinting at it, you know that they have talked with Ollie Marmol and they've got that insight, and so we should trust that. But I tweeted this out because I could understand yesterday if there was a little bit of frustration with it. And obviously we won't spend too much time on it because the Cardinals won the game, so people feel better about it, I think. Let me know your thoughts, though, Cardinals fans, on how Ollie managed the bullpen yesterday. When it's John King out there for the 10th inning after he had already pitched the 9th, you're like, oh, boy. It didn't matter if it was lefty, didn't matter if it was righties coming up to bat. It just had to be John King because he was the guy that they had rested enough and available enough to continue into the game. Kittredge, after pitching the day before, gave him an inning, and it turned out to be a roller coaster inning, but he struck out the side, also allowed a hit and a walk there in the 8th. But Cardinals were able to find a way to get through it. But this was my tweet, and this is where it's like sometimes I think we spend too much time complaining about usage and why aren't guys available. But in this case, I said I wasn't going to yell at anybody. Because for the days of June 29th, June 30th, July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd, that's 5 days, Ryan Fernandez threw 13 total pitches, and none of that was the day before Thursday's game. July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Helsley threw 17 pitches in those 3 days, and none of that came in the day before Thursday's game. Both of them had Wednesday off, and so I thought for sure Ryan Fernandez would have been available yesterday. But if they're not available, they're not available, is what I said. If you wanted to be frustrated by that out in Cardinals land, though, I also understand it. And I said I won't yell at you today because you just would figure eventually those guys would be back ready to go. They have been used a lot, and so maybe this was a spot in a series where the Cardinals were like, look, we're not going to throw either of them more than once in the series because that's going to get them the extended rest maybe they need to be fresh for the stretch run of this pre-All-Star break period, and then they'll get the break. Ryan Helsley could make the All-Star game. He's leading the league in saves. I almost wish they would come up with a reason for him not to go, just because if we're talking about overuse, he doesn't need to be firing bullets in an All-Star game. Just my opinion. Let me know what you think about that, Cardinals fans. Balancing the notion of want him to be celebrated as the guy who's leading baseball in saves by a long shot versus might need those pitches in the second half of the season if you're the Cardinals. Might need to have him rested, ready to go. Go home, spend some time with his family, and be ready for the second half. I don't know kind of how people view that, but I think it's an interesting conversation. Both Fernandez and Helsley have been used a ton in terms of the appearances. Maybe not pitches thrown or top of the league in terms of innings, but they've been into a number of games. I think both of them have hit 40 appearances before the All-Star break. So you kind of take an understanding of that as to why yesterday they might have been unavailable. It just seemed like Fernandez in particular, unless there's something physical going on where they're trying to work him through that. And I'm just going to tell you, those things happen from time to time too. Even if we don't always catch wind of it, it doesn't mean it's not going on. That's why I said we don't always have all the information out here. And sometimes I feel like when those questions come, the manager could get a little bit defensive. But I think a lot of times the questions are just simply asked because we know that the fans want to know, hey, was so-and-so not available? Why'd you do this? Because we're all armchair quarterbacking this thing. We're all kind of taking a look from the sideline and trying to decide what should have happened. So it is better when the manager is able to give that information. But I think clearly the people that covered the team that were in Pittsburgh, they seem to know that Fernandez and Helsley wouldn't be available. And because John King was able to give the Cardinals a gutsy performance, they were able to win this game. Andrew Kittredge, too. I know it was a roller coaster ride, but those 2 swinging strikeouts, he totally sorted Andrew McCutchen, as Pitching Ninja would say, and then he got a swing and a miss on Brian Reynolds with that high strike. both in 3-2 counts, both were ball four if those guys don't swing. So Kittredge, to make those pitches look close enough to offer at for both batters, he had to be doing some serious work, and that's great to see. It's felt a little bit dicey when Kittredge has come into games recently because he has not been as automatic. Remember, April is what I tweeted out on Thursday, and back in April, Andre Kittredge was spectacular. He had a .74 ERA, I believe. I looked this up yesterday, through the end of April, so it's not the same now. 3.26 is the ERA for Kittredge at this point in the year. But he did his job yesterday and made himself available, right? That's the other part. When these other guys aren't available for a given day, for Kittredge to be the guy, and he's somewhat recently off of surgery, right before the Cardinals got him. I think he had Tommy John. It's just, that's the mark of a guy that you do want to have in your bullpen. I know Cardinals fans have been riding Kittredge pretty hard. For me, Fernandez would have passed him up already in terms of leverage, but if Fernandez was not available for this game, it's a damn good thing that Andre Kittredge was, because he found a way to gut through it and help the Cardinals to this win. Let's talk about some of the other things that happened in the game that struck me. Cardinals only come up with 3 runs, and it took 10 innings to do it. It's ultimately all they needed. Carlson, nice to see Carlson with the RBI double. And we've talked a lot about maybe not understanding what his role is going to be, because we know Lars Nootbaar is coming back. He could be back as early as Friday, joining the Cardinals in D.C. That would not surprise me to see that. But if he joins the Cardinals in D.C., what does that mean for D.C., who started in center field on Thursday, had a 2-for-3 game, had the RBI double, and now has his batting average for the season up to 210. I am very intrigued to see over the next few weeks, as we approach the trade deadline, how do the Cardinals handle Dylan Carlson? Ollie Marmol went out of his way. Yesterday's postgame wasn't asked specifically about Dylan, but said, I want to mention it was big for D.C. to get us that RBI double. And if they don't have that, Cardinals basically go over in regulation, and we're talking about a different game where they aren't able to get to the extra inning scenario in the first place. DC, over his last 15 games, has come around a little bit. He's hitting 296, 8 for 27 over the last 15, couple of walks mixed in there, 3 runs batted in, so not a ton. He's typically batting toward the bottom of that lineup where there aren't quite as many RBI chances. And honestly, if he's normally batting like 7th or so, and if he's batting 7th, that means he's usually right behind guys like Goldie and Arenado, who have not been getting on base particularly often. And so that's another reason you're not finding RBI opportunities as often for Dylan. But 296 during that stretch, he's OPSing about 730, 740 over his last 15 games. And he's 4 for his last 8 over his last 7 games. So Carlson has come around to where I don't think he's, you'd look at the average and it was below 200. Now it's up to 210. The OPS is at 543. That feels still like kind of black hole territory as we talk about guys at the bottom of the order. And he really has graduated beyond that. You can even go a little bit further. His last 30 games, not a high OPS because he hasn't really had a power swing, but Dylan's hitting 250 over the last month or so, last 30 games, and hasn't struck out a ton. I mean, yeah, kind of high strikeout rate. About 25% of his at-bats have ended in Ks, but he's got a 250 batting average as well with that. And so that's something. That's more than what we were seeing from him when he first came up with the Cardinals at the beginning of the year after being injured, and they kind of rushed him along to get him back because they weren't getting production from guys like, Victor Scott and then Ciani, and they wanted to try to get him back in there and take advantage of Dylan's plate profile, what he brings to the table after a good spring. And it just took a while for him to get going. But, what does that mean for him now? Because with Nootbaar coming back and they value Ciani and what he brings in center field defensively, we know that Tommy Edman is theoretically on the horizon as he returns. And it very well could be that Tommy Edman, for all the talk about, he's the center fielder, now he's going to maybe mix in as a backup infielder as well to float around like he basically always has. What does that mean for a guy like Brandon Crawford, who has more or less done his job in recent weeks? I know the numbers don't show a lot for Brandon Crawford, but he has come around in the same way that Dylan Carlson has, where the season-long stats may not quite show it because Carlson is, started so slow, and the same thing with Crawford, but he's filling his role in a perfectly adequate way. Jose Fermin probably ends up getting sent down at some point here. Maybe it is today when Nootbaar returns, but it's just kind of interesting to see because there's not an obvious place to put Dylan, but you also wonder, even a guy like Dylan that has multiple years of team control remaining, does he have much trade value? Can you really get anything for him? And would this be a inopportune time to trade Dylan Carlson because you're basically given up on a guy when he's performing okay in his given role right now. The role is just about to change. So that would be the challenge associated with where Dylan Carlson is and kind of what his fit would be with his Cardinals team long term. So I'm curious to see how that works out. But let's talk about some other aspects of this game. Just a minor thing. I thought it was kind of funny and cool that I think it was in the first inning when O'Neal Cruz stole second base. The throw was high. Fermin jumped up to catch it. And then he tried to deke O'Neal Cruz by looking into center field and acting like the ball got beyond him. And Cruz almost stutter-stepped toward third, and he would have been tagged out if that had happened. So it was a minor thing, but I like to bring up those little moments when I notice them. And so I thought that was kind of funny that Fermin did that. We talked about Dylan's double already. Brendan Donovan's helmet came off running around third, which is one of our oldest traditions. I think he's got a better fitting helmet nowadays, but Donovan, it seemed like when he first came up, every time that he had to run two bases at once, that helmet was gone as he rounded the bag. It was almost a given. I don't feel like it's happened as much recently, but like I said, one of our oldest traditions on July 4th to have that tradition happen, man, that's really special. Wilson Contreras stealing third in the fourth inning. I don't really know what to make of this one because I think it was very close on replay review. They called him out on the field. The call stands. I just feel like maybe not. Stealing third is interesting. That feels like a very gutsy and almost haughty thing to do, to think, oh, I'm going to be able to not only steal a base, but steal the base that's a much easier throw for the catcher to make to get me out. And as a catcher, maybe he, felt like he had a tell on whatever it was to take that chance there, but it ends up being kind of costly because you get a base hit right after that. If Contreras had just been taking his secondary lead off of second base, he would have ended up scoring almost for sure on a not too sharply hit base hit to the left side. And so that's really the bummer of that. I understand being aggressive and taking chances. I'm just not entirely sure that was one. If you had a different perspective on the play, though, let me know in the comments below. I'm totally okay with that. And then we got to talk about that sixth inning that, Cardinals get first and third, nobody out, and they don't find a way to score. I think the runner from third probably has to go home there to force a rundown and avoid two outs in that spot because Contreras' grounder, with him, he didn't get a good beat out of the batter's box either. You knew he was going to be out at first. It was going to be a double play. So for as much as you don't want to give up the runner on third, I think you basically have to almost give yourself up, get into a rundown there. Maybe the runner from first is able to, during the rundown, try to find his way to third base. But even if not, you're first and second with one out instead of runner on third with two outs. Maybe that's not a good trade-off, but I think it probably would be. You'd rather have one out because there are a lot of different ways you can score with only one out and the extra base runner, obviously. It's just tough to give yourself up in that spot because you're at third and you are 90 feet away from scoring. But you just have to find a way as the Cardinals to not come away with nothing in that inning. First and third, nobody out, and they don't score. So that's a frustration there. Really felt like maybe it could be a turning point in the game. So for the Cardinals to still find a way to win that game after a moment like that is really encouraging. But at the same time, you really wish they could have made it a little bit easier on themselves by scoring in that sixth inning. Then as far as the scoring goes offensively for the Cardinals, you had to wait until the 10th inning. Pedro Pages with the RBI double in the 10th, and then Alec Burleson drives in Pedro with a base hit. And that insurance is really important in the Manfred Mann era. When you're already in the 10th inning, you've got to find a way to get a second run, especially when Pages puts himself on second base with the double, and that was his lone hit of the game. He's still only hitting 194. He's got a 592 OPS, but for what he brings defensively behind the plate and the game calling and everything that goes along with that, still feeling pretty good about Pedro Pages, and I'll be curious to see when Ivan Herrera comes back what they do there. Who's more valuable to this team? I've seen the Cardinals fans on social media kind of talk about, Ivan Herrera, does he have some trade value? Really, people are asserting it that he does and that he should be moved for something else at the deadline. I don't know what kind of value Herrera has right now, but if he does have value, I would be open to trading him. Not because I think he's a bad player. I just think with the fit on this roster, when you have a Pedro Pages doing what he's done behind the plate, and he showed moments offensively, Ivan Herrera is a better bat at this point in their respective careers. To me, there's no question about that. But I think the value of having a defense-first backup catcher who also has the proclivity towards some clutch moments, honestly, at the plate has been the case for Pedro. I think that's what carries more value, especially on a bench that is already a little bit lean and questionable. Maybe you'd like to have the better batter on the bench, but when you're talking about the backup catcher spot, it's kind of difficult for me to say, yeah, they can send Pedro Pages down when he's just been so good behind the plate. And I think he's kind of the perfect spell to Wilson Contreras behind the plate. Not to say that Wilson's not a quality catcher. I still think he's not only a good catcher, but he made himself even better in the offseason. And he talked to Jim Hayes about kind of working through post-injury after the J.D. Martinez swing where he broke his arm on it. Kind of talking about pitch framing and how he's settling back into being behind the plate. And he moved back so that he's not in as much of a risky position for something like that to happen when he's receiving the ball, but he's also trying to do his best to continue stealing strikes for his pitching staff. And so it's kind of a balancing act right now for Contreras as he gets his feel for things back behind the plate following the injury. But I think Contreras for the next several years throughout this contract, what makes him probably more viable as a hitter and keeps him sharp behind the plate is not having to play there every day. So if he's catching 3-4 times a week and Pages is doing it the other half, I really don't have a big issue with that. You'd love to think that it could be Herrera because I think there's more upside there offensively, but I also don't know that Herrera is ever going to get to Pages' level behind the plate. Again, it's not a knock on Herrera as much as it is a credit to Pages because I just think he's that good. I mean, for an organization that got very, very comfortable and used to having Yadier Molina's defensive nature behind the plate and the way he would handle the pitching staff, it wouldn't surprise me if the Cardinals look at Pages and go, you know what, that is pretty valuable. And that one year that we only had Contreras and he was a little bit green to the Cardinal organization and our way of doing things. And I've already talked about how the Cardinals needed to have, they were a little bit naive with the way that they ushered Contreras in, and they could have done a lot better in handling that whole situation last year. But knowing the importance that they place on having somebody behind the plate who knows what they're doing and knowing how it looked when for a moment it felt like they didn't have that and they didn't really know how to react, it would seem like Pedro Pages would be the profile of a player the Cardinals would appreciate long term. So I'm curious to see. Like I said, I don't know what level of value Herrera has. I think teams around the league are obviously aware of his deficit throwing the ball and trying to control the running game. But if you can look at a catcher that could potentially have, I think his ceiling is to be an 800 OPS type of guy that can hit if he plays, 450, 500 at bats throughout the season, could hit 15 to 20 home runs and be a force behind the plate and at it. So that's maybe something that would have some value. I don't really know at this point what are the Cardinals chasing, at the deadline. I still think more relief help is always going to be smart just because you're looking at a situation right now where you feel good about 1 through 7 in your bullpen maybe, and I'm putting Gallegos as the odd man out there because you're just not too sure about what he brings to the table right now. And I don't know how many guys you can afford to stash away in your bullpen that aren't actively contributing to the winning environment of that bullpen. So having the ability to go out and get somebody at the deadline, I think would be nice for the Cardinals, even as they continue to use that Memphis shuttle, and those guys have been effective. I still think relief help could be the answer. As far as starting pitching goes, I'm still monitoring that market if I'm John Mozeliak. I just wanted to make mention of the fact that Andre Pallante has done such a good job. I don't think you're imminently looking to replace him. I just think you have to be on the prowl to potentially upgrade and say, can we find somebody that's a number 2 in our rotation? And, over the latter part of the season, is there certainly a chance that one of your starting 5 could get hurt? Absolutely. So you'd like to have a good answer for when that might come to fruition. And so I'm always constantly looking for a way to upgrade that if I'm John Mozeliak. Could Ivan Herrera be involved in a trade for either of those positions? Yeah, there's definitely a possibility of that. I'm curious to see how the rest of the league might value him. And if I'm the Cardinals, I'm not looking to get rid of him, but it would be a case where if they were getting calls on him, kind of like with Dylan Carlson, you could see the Cardinals potentially finding a fit there and making something happen. Okay, as I'm going through my notes here, I want to make a note of the spot late in this game where Arenado had a very interesting trip around the bases. He basically needed replay review. Well, he did need replay review to overturn his out call at first base after the dribbler down the first base line. The pitcher was in the way. Arenado ends up getting new life after the review. I'm surprised that Ollie Marmol didn't go for the jugular with a pinch runner in that spot. I think Michael Ciani for Arenado before Brendan Donovan's double would have been the call. And I know taking your third baseman out of the game and Arenado is supposed to be a middle-of-the-order bat, but Brendan Donovan could come in from left field and play third base. So you're covered in terms of your defensive alignment. Siani goes to the outfield. Dillon probably pushes to left from center. And you're covered as far as that's concerned. So I don't have an issue with that part of it. I think if your closer and your setup man are not available, and you know that, and I'm calling Fernandez the setup man because I think he should be above the others in the pecking order right now with the way that he's performed. If they're not available, I think you have to play to win the game in regulation. You know that your bullpen is gassed, and you're not really sure how you'd handle innings 10, 11, 12. I know that it worked out for the Cardinals to win in 10, but with that mindset, I would have gone Siani to try and get that run. And I understand he's on first base, and you don't know that Donovan's going to double, and it costs you a run to not make the switch because Arenado only gets to third base on the hit. But if Arenado's on second base, they almost assuredly would have pinch ran. It's a little bit tougher on first, but Siani can steal second as well if you wanted to go that way. So it ended up working out okay because they had Siani to run in the extra inning situation, but I just feel like there was a couple of spots. You could have maybe said Nolan Gorman for Matt Carpenter at one point late in the game for a pinch hitter in that same situation, but Carpenter actually has a higher batting average than Gorman, so the more I thought about that, the more that I wasn't totally worried about not switching that out because the base hit would have done the trick. But then they end up bringing in Gorman for defense later on. It just seemed like those moves, I feel like Ollie Marmol was maybe thinking through and saying, well, if I do this now, I won't have the flexibility to do X, Y, or Z later on, but then still ended up kind of burning those guys in different ways anyway to deploy his bench. So I thought that was a little bit tricky. For me, 100% Siani, pinch running for Arenado, who is very, very slow, would have been the thing I would have done. And not even saying Siani has to be stealing, but I think running for Arenado, put yourself in the best position to be able to score that run. I think the reason they didn't do it is because it wasn't a runner in scoring position, but it is if it's Siani because he scores on that hit by Donovan, whereas Arenado was not able to. He had to stop at third base. All's well that ends well for the Cardinals. Even Brandon Donovan's playing left field in the bottom of the 10th, or pardon me, the bottom of the 10th. Cardinals were on the road. In the notch out there in left center, he makes the catch and doesn't throw the ball back in right away, which allows the runner to score from second base. It's not that he forgot how many outs there were. It's that he forgot what inning it was, I think, because there's an automatic runner on second base there. Siani was kind of desperately gesticulating, like, get the ball back in. Not really the end of the world. I saw a lot of comments on Twitter from people that were replying to me saying, yeah, I didn't really even mind that one from Donovan because it clears the bases. That run didn't matter. That's why that insurance is so important. When you know the other side's getting a Manfred man too, automatic runner on second, to be able to score two like the Cardinals were able to do in the top of the 10th, that ends up being so critical. So not really that big of a deal. The run would have scored anyway because of the two hits later on in the inning by the Pirates, but let me know your thoughts on that if you had a hot take about that. I didn't really have a hot take either way, but I think it was just a little bit of an interesting moment. And the Cardinals were able to overcome it. Really credit to John King for what he was able to do, pitching a couple of innings there. And obviously Palante had the big day, and that helps the Cardinals, man. When you're the 5 starter and you're going 7 and giving up 1, that Palante is so humble in the post games when he talks, but he's got to be absolutely giddy right now that he's been able to show people what he's all about. He's known within himself that he's capable of this, and the fact that he's going out there and doing it right now. Remember, when I did that podcast with Josh Jacobs of Dealing the Cards at the beginning of the season, a lot earlier in the year, when they were really struggling, and we were talking about, what would 2025 look like if the Cardinals season right now goes off the rails and they sell at the deadline? And I made a case of, even before the Cardinals were considerate of it, I said, Andre Pallante as a starter in 2025, for like minimum salary, whatever he would make, you could do a lot worse than that if you're the Cardinals trying to pinch some pennies. And, well, he's doing it right now in 2024 for a team that actually is trying to contend. So it is what it is, man. I don't have an issue with it, and I think Andre Pallante is doing an excellent job. Those are my thoughts from the Cardinals game. Let's go ahead and really quickly, before we get out of here, do our favorite segment, Down on the Farm. It's time to go down on the farm. And that's exactly what I will be doing later on this afternoon, going to the family farm for the long weekend, celebrating. The 4th of July party carries on. That's the way it works, man. So we'll do that, but we'll continue to have some podcasts. I'll bring my laptop with me out there in nature. It'll be good. It'll be all good. Just bear with me this weekend. I'm going to warn you in terms of the quality of the audio. Might not be the same. Don't have my setup. Don't have my microphone. But appreciate you guys who are always so supportive and understanding of that when I'm out and about. I'm still trying to do the podcast for y'all. Okay, let's talk down on the farm. Good day in the system for the Cardinals yesterday. The Redbirds of Memphis beat the Sounds 10-3. A little touchdown and field goal action for the Memphis Redbirds. Offense looked really good. They had 7 walks as a team offensively. Again, that's something that just seems to happen in the minor leagues. I mean, pitchers dealing with that strike zone down there, it is just a little bit different. Luke and Baker hit another bomb, 2 for 5 with a home run, 2 RBIs, run scored, his 24th of the season. Waited until the 9th inning to do it, but he continues to rake. Thomas Saggese had a nice day as the leadoff man for Memphis, 2 for 4 with 3 runs scored, also reached base via walk and had an RBI in that game. His OPS up to 716. Good to see that. And Jordan Walker had a 2 RBI day, 1 for 4, run scored, did walk as well. He's got the OPS at 702. Cardinals still waiting a little bit more to see more from Jordan Walker and what that could look like. Weird day as far as the pitching goes. Graceffo, only a couple of innings, 45 pitches. We can check up on if anything was going on there for Gordon Graceffo. Remember, he pitched with the Cardinals and had like 67 innings in his relief appearance and then went back down after that. So whether Gordon Graceffo has anything going on or not, we'll have to keep in mind. I was looking on Twitter, couldn't find anything right away, but just be aware of that going on. Kyle Leahy was pitching pretty well yesterday for Memphis. 3 innings in relief, 5 strikeouts, no runs allowed, just 1 hit, 1 walk. Kyle Leahy should be back here in St. Louis before too long. By the way, Andre Granillo, I have not really seen much about him this year, but he's been very good in the minors for the Cardinals this season. At Springfield AA, had a 1.47 ERA in 18 innings before he was called up. 23 strikeouts in those 18 innings. Called up to Memphis. 0.66 ERA for Granillo in 13 2/3 innings with 16 strikeouts. So on the year, 32 innings, 39 Ks, and a 1.13 ERA. If you're thinking about maybe somebody else to bring up at some point, man, Andre Granillo. He didn't have the spring, I think, that he was wanting to down there. I came into spring thinking and talking about Andre Granillo on the podcast, saying he could be a guy to watch, and just didn't really materialize for him in spring. But he has taken that and really run with it. So I mentioned his scoreless inning that he had in the game for Memphis yesterday because he's somebody to keep an eye on for sure. Let's talk Springfield before we get out of here. 7-1, the Cardinals of Springfield beat the Arkansas Naturals. I think it's Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, whatever. 7-1. It was a big day for Max Ragic. Ragic said like magic, and he was magic yesterday. 8 innings of 1-run baseball with 9 strikeouts. Former Cardinals minor league pitcher of the year, was able to have a nice day in the midst of a season that's been a little bit of a trying one for Max Ragic. His ERA at 4.89 for Springfield this year. And offensively, we mentioned again Jimmy Crooks, our favorite AA catcher, 3 for 4, a couple of RBIs, and he had a double in this game. Has the OPS up to 869. So good stuff there from Ragic. Good stuff from Jimmy Crooks. Cardinals of Springfield were winners, and the Memphis Redbirds as well. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. Stay tuned for the weekend as we talk Cardinals Nationals on the channel. Give us a follow. Give us a sub. Consider becoming a member of the channel if you want to support me a little extra. And we'll talk to you soon. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.